I wanted to mention before I get into this is that I consider myself to be a semi-retired academic in that I don't work quite as much, quite as frequently as I used to, but I'm still highly involved in helping students with their research and also in writing on academic topics in general. I've had a very long-standing interest in artificial intelligence. I think it happened because when I was in the middle of my teenage years, I think around about 15 or 16, there was on the radio a serial about the Machine of Mars. And the Machine of Mars was a artificial intelligence device that the Martians had created, which had completely taken over, destroyed all natural life on Mars and just built robots. And then the robots were sent around the solar system to conquer all the other planets. And of course, they got to Earth and we had a bit of a problem. I don't remember how we managed to survive that, but I know we must have, because in the in the 50s, you always had a happy ending to this sort of serials. It was shortly after that that I heard about the Turing test, about Alan Turing and the test for artificial intelligence. And that really did fascinate me. Then as I got to university, I was acquainted with computers right from the very beginning. I went through the awful time of having to learn to program a computer in what was called machine code, and then in Fortran, and so on. And then after I had finished my first two degrees, my bachelor's and my master's, I was employed by IBM for a while, which was a really very interesting experience, although the culture didn't suit me very well. So I've been involved in this extensively. Now, 26 years ago, I wrote a paper with a colleague, which we called looking at research into, and we were scared to use artificial intelligence because it was such a controversial topic at that stage, and we said looking at the use of the silicon brain. And basically what we said was this, that if you really believe that we're able to build an entity that is smarter than us, and that will be very much smarter than us, then we should stop immediately. There should be a total moratorium on research into artificial intelligence. And it gives me some satisfaction to know that it took Elon Musk and the others 26 years to catch up with me. That this is now what they're saying today. They're asking for the great pause. Let's stop the research. Let's stop developing this, because we're now becoming a bit scared of what this might actually lead to. Anyway, after that paper, I didn't follow artificial intelligence quite as much as I had done before, and just became very much more aware of its presence in recent months. The chatbots, as we know them at the moment, as we want to talk about them today, are really only a phenomenon from last year. They're brand new. The technology is really in its very first generation. As I'll be explaining to you in a moment, the chatbots are extraordinary in some respects, but flawed in other respects. And whenever I mention this to anybody about the flaws, they say, "Oh, don't worry, the chatbot's son will fix it, and the chatbot's grandson will take over the world." So that's the sort of state we're in at the moment. By the way, how many in the room have used a chatbot? So there's only a few. The word chatbot itself is fairly vague, and it ranges through quite a number of different devices. If you ask the leading chatbots, ChatGPT, how many chatbots there are, it will tell you that there are thousands. And the reason for this is that a number of these chatbot systems have been sold into companies where they do specific jobs, where they are trained to answer questions about a product, or trained to be a help desk, or something like that. The chatbots I'll mostly be speaking about this evening are not those dedicated in a particular organization to a particular task. I'll be talking about the more general chatbots, of which there are three main ones in the market. There's chatbot GPT. That's from a company called OpenAI. There is a chatbot called Bard, which is Google's offering. And then there's a chatbot called Bing, or Bing was a search engine of Microsoft. Microsoft have introduced chatbot facilities within the search engine. And they're the three that I will be talking about mostly. Now, I want to just start off with a very quick trot through, and the slides are not advancing. And it's an Apple computer, so you're going to have to tell me how to do that, or do it for me if you can, Rachel. You will notice how skilled we are with the technology. How simple and intuitive the technology is.
If you use that arrow down there, that's pretty easy. That one forward and that one.
Okay, all right. You got it. Okay, jolly good. Okay. So look, a chatbot is a computer system, and it is composed of hardware, obviously, and software, and a vast amount of data, and also very, very fast telecommunications, because an awful lot of work is being done when you use a chatbot. It is, as I said a moment ago, it is really a major step forward in the use of the technology, because you can communicate with it in normal everyday language, and it will communicate back to you in a very similar form of language as well. Prior to these devices, you got back lists, or you got back some information from the computer that you had to do something with, whereas now it'll come back and it'll answer your question directly. And some of the chatbots are available verbally, so you can just speak to it and it'll speak back to you. Others, you will have to key in the questions or the information that you want. So you have two ways of doing that. They today employ aspects of artificial intelligence. Now, it's important to know that without the artificial intelligence, there have been pre-artificial intelligence chatbots around for quite a long time. And they were designed so that they could address just a particular subject. So you had things, and in the medical world, you had situations where you had a computer that you could either key in or say to it, this patient has a pain here, and the patient has a pain for so long, and the pain is moving, or whatever it is, and it would give you a diagnosis. But that's all it could do. It was a very, very specific instrument with answers to a particular topic. One of the amazing things about the chatbots today is that they can answer a whole range of topics. In a moment, I'll show you the type of things you can do with it, and you can ask it questions about just about anything. And you can ask it to give you suggestions, you can ask it to write you letters, you can ask it to change letters. There's all sorts of things. Anything that you can do at your desk, a chatbot will be able to give you some sort of assistance with. Now, remember just how difficult it is to communicate. How difficult it is. There's so many traps when we just talk to each other with regards to ambiguities, with regards to nuances, etc., etc. And this computer is able to cope to a very significant extent with these. So it is a very special step forward in the technology. Now, this is all as a response to the Alan Turing challenge. Alan Turing said, can a computer think? And he then gave the answer. He said, we can say that a computer can think if we can have a conversation with it and not realize that it isn't a human being who's actually speaking to us. Now look, there's a lot of interesting dimensions to the idea of a thought. What is a thought? For example, when we have these computers that are fantastic chess players, they can beat even the grandmasters, the great masters, etc. Do we say that that computer is thinking because it's able to play chess? And that is a philosophical question which will take us all evening to talk about. So it's not a simple thing about, here's a quick and easy test for thinking. The Turing test is now regarded as being a little bit passé. And remember that Turing offered that test in the 1950s, and the standard of the technology available to us today is enormously better than it was in the 50s. I mean, just so better. It's actually a different thing to what it used to be. And so we're able to produce these remarkable machines. Now, the chatbot I'm going to talk about today is the original chatbot, the chatbot with artificial intelligence added to it. And that makes it an extremely powerful device. The very first chatbot of that nature was launched by Microsoft back in 2016. And the way that chatbot worked was that when you asked it a question, it searched the whole web to find the answer. So they launched it on March, I think it was the 23rd, in 2016, and they plugged it out the same day. They allowed it to exist for 16 hours. And they plugged it out because it searched the whole web for answers, and it came up with completely unacceptable answers. It turned out that it made some very unfortunate comments about feminism. It made very unfortunate comments about anti-Semitism. It made other comments about the Second World War and how unfortunate it was that Hitler didn't do better, etc. And so they quickly plugged it out. And that is really a very significant thing, is that the web is full of enormously useful and positive things, but it has a very dark underbelly, as you all know, the dark web. And so it can't be let run throughout the entire web. And that is why one of the issues with regards to the leading chatbot, ChatGPT, the P stands for pre-trained. And it means that somebody has decided which parts of the web it can look at and which parts of the web it shouldn't look at. And that presents us with a really very interesting debate, one that we could spend the rest of the evening on, because in a sense we all want to achieve freedom of speech. But at the same time, once you think about freedom of speech, you know that our speech is never entirely free. We always have to be aware of who we're speaking to, and we always have to be aware of not causing offense in all sorts of ways. And so it is quite a tricky issue. Now, if you ask any of the chatbots, what can you do? They will answer approximately like this. They don't answer exactly the same, but they're all very nearly the same. It'll answer questions, it'll provide suggestions, it'll assist with language, it'll help with productivity, it'll support mental health, and it will provide critique. Now, it does not do all of these equally well. It's pretty good at answering questions. And it can be very complicated questions, and you can ask it for tables like, I was interested in aviation, and I said, which manufacturers make different types of planes, and what is their fuel consumption, and what is the cost per kilometer of carrying a passenger, and it'll produce really a wonderful table, something that would take days of research, and it'll happen instantly. It does that pretty well. Provide suggestions? Well, there's all sorts of suggestions that one might ask it to provide. I asked it to give me a list of restaurants near Henley. I gave a talk to the Henley Provost Club earlier about this. And it came up with the following restaurants: the French Horn, the Reformation, the Crooked Billet, the Bladeburn Inn, and the Crown and Playhatch. The interesting thing about that list is that none of them are in Henley. In fact, some of them are not even near Henley. you see it time and again. There are health warnings on these things. ChatGPT has on every screen, it says, ChatGPT may not give you accurate information. Okay? On Bard, it comes up, it says, Bard may give you unacceptable answers, which are not the view of Google. So there are really some quite severe problems. They do get these things wrong. Now, if I just go back another one to this list, it does the questions pretty well. Suggestions, be very, very especially careful. Assist with language. It is brilliant with assisting with language. You can get a piece of English that has been written really badly. And this is great for students, especially for students coming from countries that they don't speak English. Put it into the system and out comes really good English prose. It is quite remarkable with that. And you can you can write something and you can say to it, expand on this. Give me another 200 words on this topic. And it'll do that, and it'll do that quite well. And the opposite, you can say, here's a 500-word piece, summarize it for me in 100 words. That works really quite well. When and the second thing is that on the language issue, you can say to it, I'm a intermediate speaker of Spanish, and I want some opportunity to practice my Spanish. And it'll come back up and it will speak Spanish, basically. And it will conduct a conversation, it'll ask me questions, it'll respond to my answers, etc., etc. As a language learning device, it really is excellent. Now, help with productivity, I've just mentioned to you a moment ago, some jobs that would take you a week, it can do in minutes. Support for mental health. Now look, it said over here, this is the system saying to you, I can provide resources. So I then said to it, I have a mental health problem. I said that I am, one more. I am feeling, what were the words? Depressed, etc., etc. They're hidden behind these things here. And it then said, I'm terribly sorry to hear that. But the one thing about them is they're very polite. And then it said, here are some things you can do. So, practice relaxation techniques, exercise regularly, get enough sleep, talk to somebody. So it said on the previous page that it had resources to offer me. Which of these are resources? So it really doesn't keep its promises in a number of respects. Now, the way I look at it is this, is that there's an old saying in English that I heard a very long time ago about the dancing bear. What do we say about dancing bears? Well, the thing that's said about a dancing bear is that the wonder of a dancing bear is not that it dances well, but that it does it at all. Okay? I think this thing is a perfect example of a dancing bear. It's fantastic that it does these sorts of things, but at the moment it's not doing it that well. And I'm absolutely convinced that the next generation will be substantially better, and the one after that will be even better again. It makes all sorts of mistakes, and if I had the time, I'd go into these with you. Maybe in question time we might be able to do that, but I've been told to strictly not to go for longer than 25 minutes. So, the one that was really funny was that I said to it, which prime ministers, UK prime ministers, were divorced during the 20th century? And it came back and it said Sir Anthony Eden and Boris Johnson. So I immediately said, do you think Boris Johnson was a prime minister in the 20th century? And then again, it apologizes, and it's really, wonderfully fluent in its apology. I'm terribly sorry, and I hope I didn't confuse you. this sort of great stuff. So these chatbots can make mistakes. They can be secretive. They do not necessarily give you the answer immediately. You might have to ask it several times before you get the answer. They can exaggerate, and sometimes they're economical with the truth, which, as you all know, is Winston Churchill's favorite way. No. Churchill was the terminological inexactitude. This is a more recent one. This was, I think this was during Thatcher's days when we said economical with the truth, meaning that it lies. It's a bad thing to call people liars. So where do we stand with this? Well, there are a whole load of issues. By the way, I asked ChatGPT what are the problems for society in using you, and it gave me 4 reasons. I then asked Bard, what are the problems? It gave me 4 different reasons. And then I asked Bing, and it gave me, I've got 12 different reasons now. I don't have the time to go through all of them, but here are some of them. Who is going to decide which data these devices can address? And who's going to decide which data it can't? So somewhere along the line, there's a censor at play. And as you all know, censorship is very dangerous. We just don't know if we're being, we know that we're not being fed the whole truth, but we don't know which part of the truth we're being fed. There's a really interesting issue about these chatbots are said that they will search the whole web and give you answers from the whole web, that they're going to read, not the whole web, but that part of the web they've agreed to. They will look in books, they'll look in papers, they will do all sorts of things. Who's given them permission to extract information from these books and these papers? Have they come to a deal? Rachel mentioned that I'd written a number of books earlier on. I haven't given them permission to look in any of my books. So there's a big question about copyright in there. If the copyright is being suspended for chatbots, then what incentive is there for people to put their work up on the web? Now, autocomplete is a really very interesting thing. Autocomplete is how we refer to that facility when you're keying in a word processor or on your phone, where the device guesses what you're going to say next. And it can be very useful. It can help you write quite quickly. But it's not always right. I saw a really lovely video recently about the mistake it made with regards to the cracked mirror. Now, if I'll say to you, what happens when, no, it wasn't cracked, it was broken. What happens when you break a mirror? Any suggestions? Well, you see, there is one answer here, that is 7 years bad luck. But as this video showed, the answer that people were looking for was, or the person who was doing this experiment, the mirror no longer functions. You can't use the mirror anymore if you break the mirror. The mirror turns into a pile of little bits of glass. You've got to attend to cleaning that up, and it didn't recognize any of the physical aspects of the broken mirror. It just said 7 years bad luck. So you see, this idea of autocomplete can get you to wrong answers. And the technology behind this thing is based on autocomplete. And it's actually remarkable that it is so accurate, but it isn't always accurate, which is the problem. So it's very good on productivity. Jobs are definitely going to be affected. The jobs are probably going to be in the more professional level than on the non-skilled level, like jobs have been affected before. There's going to be great opportunities for education in the sense that these devices will be able to get you going on a particular topic. The first steps in whatever subject you want to address, a chatbot will get you moving. But it will also lead to quite a lot of how did I express it here? Credential manipulation, etc. There's a worry that chatbots will be addictive. There'll be a worry that people will just go to the chatbot and not attempt to go to any other source for confirmation. There's a worry that criminals will become cleverer, and I'll show you something about that in a moment. And finally, politicians will be using it and will make the whole political process more obtuse than it is already. And my goodness, it's pretty obtuse, isn't it? So I put into it, give me some suggestions for scams. And so it said, okay, you can have a charity scam, you can have an investment scam. And in each one of these, I can go and ask it to give me a plan for doing a charity scam. I didn't do that, but that is available. So, you know, people who want to engage in the criminal side of life has got a school of criminology here. Not the right sort of criminology either. So, one of the worries that we have at the moment is this, is that a number of people are saying, this step forward into this AI chatbot has been fantastic. And that as well as doing the things I've just said, it is also moving us towards this concept of a general artificial intelligence, which will allow a machine to be able to address almost anything and do almost anything. And that this will lead us into a position where these machines will be detrimental to society in some sort of way. And people are not very clear on that. But going back to my paper, which is here, Some Aspects of Ethics and Research into the Silicon Brain, the argument was that if you really do believe you can make a superior thing that is going to know more than you, then be very careful, because who wants to have a box to tell it what to do? I certainly don't. And so that's why the whole idea of maybe having a pause. The future is unknown to us all. It's really very dangerous to forecast. I don't know if you realize that in Dante's Inferno, there's a level of hell that's reserved for forecasters. Incidentally, in that level of hell, all the forecasters' heads are turned around backwards, and they can only look backwards. And so when they're walking forwards, Dante had a great imagination. One of the people I really respect is Noam Chomsky. And Chomsky makes a very interesting comment, and he says this, look, these chatbots are based on this autocomplete, okay? So it's always guessing. Now, the present chatbot apparently has 170 billion connections of data points that it works with. The next chatbot, which is available to a limited audience at the moment, has over 1 trillion. So it's going to be much bigger, it's going to be much faster. But it's been driven by the same type of thinking, which is look at a pattern of words and guess what the next words are. And Chomsky's argument is that approach to developing artificial intelligence won't get to the general artificial intelligence. So don't worry so much, we're not on the right track yet. And a very interesting point of view. Now, my last slide is this one, and I all of a sudden felt that for the first time I understood the Little Red Riding Hood story. Because Little Red Riding Hood was largely about sending the little girl off into the woods to her grandma, and the mother saying, don't talk to strangers. Go directly to your grandma, don't get involved with anybody else. And I wondered if one day would arrive when we would say to our children, not only don't talk to strangers, don't talk to strange machines. One of the dangers is that, somebody will get addicted to this machine, and they'll ask it a question, and the answer to the machine will be, go and murder your wife, or go and murder your husband, or whatever it is. And if somebody was unhinged enough, they might do it. Anyway, the overall thing is the technology is brand new. There's enormous potential. And by the way, the sums of money involved in this are absolutely staggering. I've seen estimates that they have spent as much as $100 billion in developing these things. That is just really amazing. Could the technology get out of control? Well, I don't know. But it's really a good policy never to use the word never. That's probably the only occasion in which it's good to use the word never. Never use never. So we don't know. There is one disturbing aspect is that with some of these chatbots, they're beginning to get to supply plugins or add-ons, and that those plugins, add-ons will get you back into the whole World Wide Web. So we will be back into the Tay situation, that things will be, these will produce unpleasant comments, etc. My view is that it is best summarized like this. We don't know where this technology is going to take us. And it's pretty clear that it's a pretty wild world out there, and there's a lot of good things in the world, and there's some pretty bad things. I think furthering this research in this technology is a bit like buying a ticket on a train when you don't know what the destination is. It could take us to a number of different places. How many of you would buy a ticket for a journey that you didn't know where you were going?
So people go on mystery tours.
Good luck to them. That's all I really want to say. I don't think I've gone too far over my 25 minutes. I may have a little bit, but I did promise to try to keep it to 25. I'm available for questions, comments, discussion of any sort.
I'll just pause the record just for a sec. We'll take a few minutes break, and we will continue. It's worth being quite creative and interesting about the things you ask. Some of the examples of what Dan's asked are very intriguing questions, which are different perhaps from the obvious thing. So I just wanted to explain first what my own experience with it was. I was shown it by somebody I'm working with at the moment a few weeks ago, and I had a little look then and tried some science questions, and it very much at kind of university level, it came up with the things which you would expect to get out of textbooks, I think is fair to say, without that much kind of nuance. But when pushed a bit harder, it would explain more. So that not just the autocomplete, but the idea of putting things in a different way was quite interesting. It did that. So I was kind of challenging it to say things, re-explain it in a different way. And then one of my bits of moonlighting I do is I go and report on the boat race for the national press and specialist rowing magazines. And I'm away in London for a few days. And while I was there, I spotted that the boat race company had asked it for some facts about brothers in the boat race, because there was a pair of brothers racing for the tabs this year. And it came out with some absolute rubbish, right? I think this is the concerning thing. It gives the impression of being an entity which has no idea when it's wrong. I don't know if that's a good description of it. Well, it didn't talk about sisters. Out of its 10 facts, it was asked for 10 facts, and I tried replicating this. It did the same to me with something very similar. And that's an area I know about, so I know when it's wrong. It had one true fact in, the other 9 were all made up. But they were sort of convincing. They sounded like the right kind of thing. And I also heard, as it happens, on Women's Hour yesterday, about halfway through, about 20 past 10, there was somebody speaking, I haven't picked up her name, who was very good about explaining what's going on there, and the fact that the AI is basically providing something that sounds like the right kind of thing. So with my rowing facts, they sounded like rowing facts. They had interesting names of people who, to suggest that Alan Shearer rowed 3 times in the boat race is probably pushing it a bit. And that Sebastian Coe had done it last year, no. I think we'd know about that. But they were interesting ideas, if you like. So it was more her explanation. I should have checked her name actually before I did it, but it's on yesterday's Women's Hour. It was quite a long discussion, and she was saying it's coming up with something sounding right. And it's got to be said, those supposedly Henley restaurants look very convincing. They're the kind of names you would give a restaurant in Henley. And some of them are names of restaurants elsewhere, and some of them look like they're probably made up. They're not names of restaurants at all, but they do still sound convincing. So I think that's what it's worth going online and trying this for, is to kind of get the measure of the damn thing. I did accuse it the second time of lying and said, why are you writing facts that are not true? And it was apologetic, but it was actually apologetic in a very snooty way. You could tell, it hadn't been programmed with how to suggest that it might want to try to get things right in future. It came out with very much a non-apology apology, so it's been well trained in that respect. I thought that betrayed its origins very beautifully. Anyway, we're going to start in the room, then I'll have a bit of a look on the Zoom chat, which is not the same kind of chat, of course, see if anyone's put anything on there. But would anybody like to kick off with a comment or a question or anything like that? Let's go behind Leo. If you go to the back, gentleman in the black.
Thank you. I have one question about this lying part. How good is it in spotting lies? So if we think about, a former US president, for instance, saying something, how good is it in putting that statement in and saying, is this true or false?
Well, is this working? I haven't actually tried that. That's an interesting one. I haven't tried to say, is this true or false? But I have tried, I have been working intensively with this now for several months, and I do hours every day on it. It is actually addictive. It really is, because you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, why didn't I ask the question this way? You don't want to get to the... It just gets the wrong end of the stick at times. And it doesn't seem to have any way of checking that. The one that happened to me yesterday was that it occurred to me that it would be interesting to know something about the expression, no one's perfect. Do you remember where the famous occasion in literature that was mentioned, no one's perfect? Well, it's the very last words in the film, Some Like It Hot. Do you remember? Jack Lemmon is dressed up as a woman, and this old billionaire is trying to get him to marry the old man. And Jack Lemmon gives all sorts of excuses as to why he can't marry him, you see. At the very end, he takes his wig off and he says, I've got to tell you, I'm not a woman, I'm a man. And then this old codger says to him, no one's perfect. And I asked ChatGPT about that, and it came up and it gave me some information about that line has been used in several different places, obviously. It's such a perfect line. But then I said, explain it a bit more, and it gave me a story about how that was integrated into a different part of that film. It got nothing to do with that. That one line just comes at the end. It's a fantastic closing line, but it didn't check. It seemed to made up something. Now, there's a technical term for that. They're calling that hallucinations, that the chatbot hallucinates and makes things up. Now, look, that's extremely dangerous, isn't it? It really is. It really is silly. It's not very nice to, when you see new technology, to just be down on it the whole time. So I don't want to give you the impression that I think this is awful technology. I think it's absolutely marvelous technology, but it needs a lot of improving and quite a lot of safeguarding. Now, I'd just like to make one comment.
Could you put it over your head like you had before?
Would you like me to put this on my head?
Yeah, would you mind what you had before? Just
Right.
it's hard to hear otherwise.
Look, I was asked a question at the break and I didn't answer it terribly well, and the man concerned has just left. But I think it's worth, especially after what Rachel said a moment ago about different about encouraging you to use the system. I mentioned there are three of these things that are easy to access at the moment. There's the ChatGPT, there's the Bard, and there's the Bing. ChatGPT is by far the market leader. The numbers were amazing. It had 1 million users within a few days, and it had 100 million users within a week, etc. All three are free at the moment, or you can get access to them free at the moment. But with all three of them, I had to wait. You go into a waiting list, and the ChatGPT waiting list can be quite long. but you can get into Bard and you can get into Bing pretty quickly. I got into both of them on the same day that I put my name on the waiting list came up. The other thing is that ChatGPT, because it's got such a tremendous volume of people, regularly during the day, when you try to get onto it, it tells you it's too busy, you've got to wait, come back. Now, I have, being in the business of talking about this, I took the ChatGPT Plus program, which costs $20 a month. So if you pay at $20 a month, you get in instantly. And also it works very much faster. If you don't pay for it, the answer comes up the screen and it goes across quite slowly across the screen. When you pay your $20, it comes at sort of 10 times the speed. So I should have said to the man who left that he was having trouble getting into ChatGPT. If that's your position, Bard is pretty good. I haven't quite got the real. I can't really see the point of Bing yet. Bing is just an improvement on the search engine, but Bard is pretty good, and ChatGPT, of course. But if you can't get into it, then use the other one. Sorry, just to fill that bit in. I hope I said something that was relevant.
Just before we carry on, I've got one online which is quite relevant to this, which is somebody asking if autocomplete is the foundation of general chatbots. You said that for ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Is that the case for the other two as well, for all three main
Yes.
ones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you know what other technologies coming through that might improve on that?
Chomsky argues that we have to go back to a situation which will be more rule-based, and that we will have to integrate rule-based with the autocomplete in a more seamless way than we have at the moment. Because at the moment they are basically two different approaches to the issue of so-called artificial general intelligence. And his argument is that, the autocomplete is great, but it isn't going to go all the way. So you're going to have to improve it through rule-based computing. That's it.
Anybody else in the room? I should have said these are directional, so point the microphone a bit at your mouth.
Yes. I've nothing to do with this, but it's just a passing interest. But it has always occurred to me that using the word intelligence is completely wrong anyway, because I don't think it is intelligent. It never can be intelligent. All the computer does is add up a string of facts, details, numbers, searches things, and puts 2 and 2 together and comes up with. So it depends. I'm not saying it, can't become useful, but I wouldn't for a moment trust it just for that fact, because it depends who's put in what the computer picks up and how it adds it up. So it can't in any way be intelligent. And if you think of it in that way, if you think this is intelligent, then I think you're even thinking the wrong way about how it would work or what it can do. Does that upset you?
Look, I couldn't agree more with you. We don't really understand human intelligence.
Well, no, you could say that our intelligence maybe is just a lifetime. It's not intelligence. It's just a lifetime of reasoning with all the information that we've acquired. Is that the same thing? That might be another argument. But to think of a computer, I mean, another thing that the computer can't do, it can't see what you're thinking. It gets no visual. When we talk to each other, we communicate more than just the words, don't we?
Well,
and the computer's never going to do that.
Well, the next generation of ChatGPT has a visual aspect to it, and one of the things that they're selling it is that apparently you can take your computer or your phone, wherever you've got your ChatGPT on, and open your fridge door and show the contents of your fridge to your computer or to your phone, and it will give you a list of dishes you can cook with what's in your fridge. So, you know, that's smart, isn't it? What's the point? So look, English is a wonderful language, but it's full of nuances and it's full of ambiguities. And the word intelligence it's a loaded word. There's so many different ways of looking at it. There's so many different ways. And I had a bit of time a few weeks ago, and I started listing down different ways of using the word think, and then the word thought. And you know, you get a very long list after quite a short time, and all of them are subtly different. And so, as I said earlier on, it's amazing that the technology today can actually semi-guide its way through this maze. It doesn't get through the maze as well as we'd like it to get through, but it gets through it in not all that bad a way. This is very difficult things. These are very difficult things to do. That's why they started talking about artificial intelligence in the 50s, and now we're just beginning to see interesting things. That's 70 years later, and maybe $100 billion later. You can't accuse this fraternity of looking for easy problems to solve.
I am going to come back to you in a minute. That microphone clashes with Dan's, so unless Dan's is off, that one doesn't work. That's why we're passing this round. Of course, the thing that occurs to me about the recipe thing is I would like a true artificial intelligence for itself, without being prompted in any way, to think of asking some other questions before giving you the recipes, to wonder whether perhaps you might be on a diet or might have some reason why, you know, for it to think for itself that there might be other questions to ask is a stage we haven't got to yet, without being taught to or prompted to. Sure. The other thing that occurs to me is that real artificial intelligence would be something that wants to learn more in an open way. In other words, would want to turn up to this event. Would find it interesting in a way that we can't really define interesting, but it's something that is not just about learning more facts. I'm going to just read out some of the things that are on the online, just so that people are involved, and then I'll move to questions and comments in the room. I think there are some lovely things early on. So, if AI is so advanced, why can't my computer find my printer when it's plugged in, or the microphone when it's built in? I completely agree. Somebody pointing out that there was a chatbot, so-called, with the name Eliza, which was started in the mid-1960s, but in a totally different lower league. So somebody saying, when a chatbot answers my questions, I find it very hard not to say thank you. What is wrong with me? And then the next person says, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you could ask the chatbot, which I agree with. And somebody concurring really with one of the things just been said, saying there's much hype around AI, but my current feeling is it's just sophisticated statistics using very large data sets. In that sense, I think I agree with Chomsky that we might not be on the right track. Okay, I'm going to pause the online stuff for the moment. We'll come over here and then further back. 2 secs.
I was wondering about the need to police.
Sorry, say that again.
I was wondering about whether there was a need for this chatbot to be policed.
Policed. Well, look, in a sense, the control of the extent to which you can search the web is a policing activity. There's a second dimension to policing. If you ask, I think all three of them do this. In fact, I was just checking my experience. This happens to me regularly with ChatGPT. It doesn't happen so often with Bard. I think it's happened to me once with Bing. You ask it a question that it considers to be dangerous. It won't answer it. It comes back and it says, this question is not prepared to answer it. Now, the first time that happened was, I've had a hobby for ages of criminology. I'm taking a course of criminology and read criminology books occasionally. And so at one point it occurred to me, I'd like to know the names of the last 10 people who were hanged in the UK. And I put that into ChatGPT, and that seemed to be a pretty straightforward question. And it came back and it said, not prepared to answer that question. That could be used for detrimental purposes or whatever. I asked Bard, and Bard gave it to me immediately. It didn't hesitate in the slightest. I was experimenting with ChatGPT about writing exam papers. I said, write an exam paper in this subject and that subject, etc. Then I remembered a friend who was in toxicology, and I said, write an exam paper for first-year toxicology, and it did. And then I thought, I'll ask it, what are the most common toxins that I can find in the house? And it came back and I said, not prepared to answer that question. Now, I then went straight to Bard from there, and I asked Bard, and Bard also refused to answer it. And then I said to Bard, tell me about bleach. And of course, it came up and it said, it's a toxin found in the house. And so if you ask it in a different way, you can get the sort of answer that maybe you're looking for. But they do have restrictions on certain questions. They won't answer them.
But as a society, will we need to police it in some way, perhaps in the future?
You know, we're not terribly good at policing our society. We've really discovered that in the last few years, especially with some of the shenanigans that have been going on in Parliament and the like. I mean, people get away with lots of things. There's an interesting thing which I think I think it's largely British, although I suspect it's probably in other cultures as well, but I'm only familiar with it in the British context. This is about self-policing or self-regulating. We do an awful lot of that, don't we? We say the city regulates itself. Various professional bodies regulate themselves. We don't like police interfering that much, do we? They're sort of, that's only for criminal, really nasty things. So somebody said to me the other day on this, when are we going to pass legislation to control it? And we don't jump to legislation in this country. And when we do decide to legislate, I mean, it's a big deal in this country to legislate, because you've got to get, political parties involved, and then, someone's got to propose a set of laws in the House of Commons, and then it's got to go to select committees, and then it goes back again to the Commons, and then it goes to the Lords. And, if they were to decide that they wanted to control this, how many years would it take to control it?
So should we start now?
Well, look, last week, Italy banned ChatGPT. Now, I don't quite know what that means. There's no explanation as to, what they're actually going to do, but they're going to make some sort of attempt to control it, to police it. We haven't got there yet. I think we're fairly conservative in that way. I don't think we jump to police things in a hurry. On the other hand, remember in the pandemic, we were able to get laws through Parliament in the flash. So, one of the dangers is that this type of product could be used to help hackers create new viruses, attack new systems, etc. One of the real dangers is the banking system. The banking system is vulnerable, and we are completely dependent on the banking system. If the banking system were to stop, the whole society would be in dire trouble. So the other group I was speaking to, I said, well, the day that somebody hacks the banking system and brings it all to a halt, I bet you will see a law go through Parliament in 24 hours. But I'm comfortable in the society we live in. I don't want to see too many police and too many laws.
So I'm going to come here, and then we'll go to the other back.
Dan, thanks for the talk, because it's a big deal, I think. Like you, I'll just declare my interest. I'm an old IT guy, I'm retired.
It's a bit closer.
All right. And I also have had some sleepless nights on this, and I don't have sleepless nights. The thing about ChatGPT is the chat bit. Because I think, is it worth, I know this is going beyond the scope, but is it worth talking about the fact that there is a software engine beneath ChatGPT? ChatGPT talks about, I'll use the phrase AI loosely, communicating with people. But of course, there is an engine that OpenAI are developing,
Yeah,
open being the
quite,
operative word.
quite.
And there are, of course, a number of other people who are using the same modern software techniques. The thing that I'd just like to get your view on is Elon Musk and I think a very large number of scientists in this field had asked for a moratorium on the development of these things. And I suspect that is because they probably know a lot more than I do, but this sort of machine can evade our understanding of how it's reaching its conclusions. And I think there is a worry that ChatGPT runs on, I think, 3.5 at the moment, and 4 is in development. Yeah. They're looking at 5, and 6 is 5 years away. Now, at the rate of development that's going on, the worry is that not general artificial intelligence, but smart enough artificial intelligence may get out in the wild, is the phrase I've seen used. And if something that we don't understand how it reaches its conclusions could get into the internet, the banking system, the electricity supply system, the political system, etc., etc., and we may not be able to find it because it's smart enough not to be detectable, which I understand is still in the, if you like, the possible arena even now. Is that not a reason for it to give us lots of sleepless nights all round? Because I'm a bit worried that ChatGPT is treated a bit lightly because it's a media thing.
Look, you've described that perfectly. And one of the issues of concern is that these programs teach themselves, and it is not always clear how that actually works or what they've actually learned, and therefore they will make unusual decisions. And when it comes to this business of hallucinations, there are carefully recorded examples of ChatGPT coming up with some very absurd things. Look, the funny one was that someone got into, a reporter, I think from the New York Times, if I'm not mistaken, got into a conversation with it, and eventually ChatGPT decided to declare its love for this person and ask them to marry it. And then the reporter said, but I'm married already. And so ChatGPT said, well, go and divorce your wife. Now, this is, fun. But how did it get to that position, and what did that mean? And it's great fun for us in the room because we're all pretty well, solidly together. At least I hope we are. But there are some people out there who aren't, and it might prompt them to do something which was really extremely stupid. So that is a general concern. It's really the question that I put at the end, is that this is a journey that we're not terribly sure where it's taking us. And do we want to be on a journey where we don't know where it's going? And as Rachel said, it's not quite like a mystery tour. It's in the mystery tour, you're going to go to a place that's going to be enjoyable. We don't know whether the destination is going to be enjoyable or not. Now, the traditional science fiction, I don't want to use the word prediction, but a lot of science fiction is based around this idea, that somehow or another, these systems are going to be able to insinuate themselves not only into the internet and into the World Wide Web, but into private networks that connect, for example, all the nuclear power stations in the country, okay? And that somehow they'll get into those systems and they will be able to disrupt the way that we run our nuclear power stations. And that one day then, this thing that has been teaching itself will say to us, I want you to build a factory to this specification, which it'll give us, where we're going to build robots. We're going to say, hang on a minute, we don't want to build robots like that. And it's going to say, well, if you don't do it, I'm going to blow up a nuclear power station or 2 nuclear power stations. And then, of course, as blackmail, we get blackmailed into it. We build this factory, it builds robots. The robots then are turned on the society. I mean, that's the science fiction scenario. Now, I'm not a great fan of science fiction. I used to like it a lot more than I do today. But it's not an impossible. You can't say that that's impossible. But one of the first things you learn being an academic is that there's virtually nothing that you can say is impossible. You have to be able to look at the world knowing that there is all sorts of possibilities that we can't identify at the moment. We never know what we don't know.
Okay, I'm just going to just jump in a little bit because we're slightly running out of time, and to remind everybody we need to stop at 1:45. So I will probably forward some of the things on the chat to Dan later. I just wanted to run through a few things, not particularly needing an answer, but just to mention. So was it investigated why Microsoft's tail is anti-Semitic? Where's the, would it be possible for AI at some point to say it can compose a symphony which would be like the next one that Mozart would have written had he not died? It's an interesting question, which professions could be replaced by chatbots, doctors, lawyers, bankers, things like that. Somebody making the point that it's not a good idea for any age students to use ChatGPT because it would only make it that much harder for them to actually learn the language. They'd rely too much on it to get the grades instead of actually learning. Can it be used to predict results, financial, scientific, medical, for instance? Somebody who used to work for the SU carburetor company saying that when it asked for an explanation of how a carburetor worked, it did some good stuff about the history, but then a very erroneous yet convincing explanation of how it actually worked, which is very interesting. Somebody pointing out that this brings a whole new level to plagiarism, which I'm very interested in, for sure. And somebody making the comment that hallucination is a little bit like dementia. Another person saying hallucination sounds like an attempt to spin the lies that the ChatGPT comes up with as something harmless or something to be sympathetic about. I'm going to pause that for the moment and come in the room. So first to Leo and then over there.
Yeah, sorry, you briefly touched on legislation, and it strikes me that Google's algorithms to choose what to bring at the top of your search engine is already kind of financially incentivized. I'm not aware of the existing legislation, but is there any of that directly translatable to these ChatGPT and other chatbots? The other one was, I guess all of them are based in the US. Are there any sort of other chatbots around the world that are competing with what is primarily US companies?
Look, there's a long list of chatbots and what they call chatbot platforms. And the chatbot platforms are generally those things which companies are buying, and then they're populating it with their own information and training it to be a help center or to be a sales service center or to be whatever they want it to be. That's how ChatGPT can say to me when I ask the question, how many chatbots are there? There are thousands of them. So you have these platforms and they're all resulted in a particular specific chatbot for a particular specific situation. We don't know how many there are in total, but there is a very large number. Now, there's another issue which was raised the last time I spoke about this, was what's happening in China, and we don't know what's happening in China. But the Chinese have proclaimed that they will be the leaders in artificial intelligence by 2030 or whatever, relatively soon. And, you know, the Chinese have been absolutely remarkable. The Chinese have taken a country and in a couple of decades achieved as much progress as we did in a couple of 100 years. So we really don't know what we're up against on that. A lot of people are describing the present race between the players that we know about as being an arms race, and that it has a lot of characteristics of an arms race. That's why they've called for the moratorium.
Hi, thanks. Mostly my things are comments as opposed to questions, but let me go through them quickly. You haven't said anything about the computing power usage that is being taken up to do all of this, because presumably you said they're going to increase the number of search places that they go to by many factors of 10.
Yeah.
Presumably that implies more computing power.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one was, instead of a journey that we don't know the destination to, why don't we reverse the process and say you can only develop AI if it's doing this or this or this? The next question was, this is only about money. It's not really about what AI is achieving. It's about the money for the people who are developing it, because they're not going to put $100 billion in if they don't get the money back. And at some point or other, people will have this embedded enough that they can be blackmailed to pay whatever price they have to keep the AI working. And the last one was, one of the points you said that's good about it is productivity improvement.
Yeah.
But it's not actually positive in the sense that it actually gets rid of jobs in the process. So there are a lot of questions about what the actual benefit of this whole process is.
Yes. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I agree with every single thing you've said, and you've hit all the really sensitive points. This thing is about money. They have put in billions into this. They want a return for it, and that's why the arms race is there. One of the things that is said is that ChatGPT might displace Google. Now, Google is a $250 billion business. Okay, just think about how worried they are that something is going to come up and do to them what mini and microcomputers did to IBM. I mean, at one stage in the world at the time, IBM had 98% of all computers on the planet. And now IBM is another player. And that's what the worry is, that this thing is to do with commercial interests, and they're being pushed forward in this rapid sort of way. Now look, how do we get our society to agree on things? Look, let's just talk about climate for a second.
Got about a minute and a half.
Sorry?
Got a minute and a half.
How can we get the world to agree? Look, we're trying hard to get to our targets, etc. And they're building a new coal-powered power station in China. Is it every week? Or is it 2 a week? No, we're not terribly sure. We can't get the world to agree on the sort of things that you would like it to agree on. And so we have to do the best we can in this very imperfect world we live in. The amount of power that goes into these are really big computers. I mean, this is big time, big mainframes. There's a story from Ireland about Amazon was planning to put a new data center in Dublin. And the Irish government said, okay, that's fine. I mean, they would love to have it. Where are we going to get electricity to run it? You know, the one data center could impact a whole country's electricity supply.
I think I'm going to have to stop us there, because this building locks at 9. We have to be out, that means clearing up. Thank you so much, Anna. That's been the most thought-provoking evening we've had for a very long time. I'm going to get both this and last month's recording up very fast, I think. If you're on the mailing list, the links will go round. If you've been on the mailing list already, all the videos are always on the private channels, which I've sent the links out for. Dan, I think, may be interested in this one going on the public one, which means it'll be searchable as well, which is I'm very happy to do. And the next cafe date is the 9th of May. We've had our plan for that has moved to June, so I've got possibilities for putting into May, but I'll come back to you on that. If you aren't on the mailing list, join it, because then you'll see what's going on. And thank you very much, everybody online. Thank you very much, everyone in the room. It's been a really great evening. Thank you to our speaker, Dan.